Hello, coming to you from one of the party cities of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, DJ Bryce Journey. Tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 20. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Lost Cities, the board game, out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off Dixit, King of New York, and Tikal. On the reaction segment, I'll discuss an embarrassing sales Cool Stuff Inc. had recently. On the What I Have Been Playing segment, I'll review Merlin. On the Obscure Bryce game segment, I'll review The Three Commandments. And we wrap up the episode by continuing my top 5 games of Halloween countdown with number 2 on the list.
Oh gosh, I'm a say, different enough for me here, flexing.
I had a chance to bring Lost Cities, the board game, out of the dust recently. I last played it 2 years, 8 months, and 19 days ago after giving it as a Christmas gift to some friends. My gifts come with bonus tutorials on how to play, haha! As the name implies, this is a board game version of Rainer Knizia's popular Lost Cities card game, one of the definitive 2-player card games out there, and a game I talked about in this segment a few episodes ago. I'm in the minority on this one, but I think the board game iteration of Lost Cities is far superior to the card game version. I find the addition of the various tokens and tracks a really engaging element. You get all the great decision-making opportunities of the card game, but with the additional element of which track to advance and explore downwind. The added tension of trying to beat the opposing players to the tokens placed on the tracks is a wonderful bonus. I brought it out of the dust this time to show to my father-in-law. Knizia games have been going over very well with him, and this one did as well. I won this time by collecting the most tiki tokens, which wound up being the difference. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Pedro Silva, username Malger, had a chance to bring 3 fun titles out of the dust recently. First was Dixit, the award-winning storytelling game designed by Jean-Louis Ribera and published in 2008 by Liblud. He last played it 4 years, 3 months, and 3 days ago and currently rates it a 6 out of 10. He writes, I usually demo this game several times a year, especially when faced with newcomers to the hobby in a group of 5 or 6. But mostly just teach it and don't actually play. This play was in a family gathering with my brother and his family, including my niece's boyfriends, one of which is not really a gamer. It went rather well and all 5 players had fun, me included. Up next was King of New York, the sequel to the modern classic area-controlled monster fighting game King of Tokyo, designed by Richard Garfield and published by Yellow in 2014. He last played it 2 years, 8 months, and 14 days ago and currently rates it a 6.4 out of 10. He writes, at the same family gathering, this time with only the gamer niece and her boyfriend, while I waited for the paint on a small repair I did to my car to dry. I almost won, having gathered a healthy points lead early on, but the niece got a good combo of cards to snatch the win away. Last up is Tikal, the modern classic exploration and action point allowance system game from legendary powerhouse designer duo Kramer and Kiesling, published in 1999 by Rio Grande Games. Pedro last played it 1 year, 9 months, and 12 days ago. He writes, I remember not really liking Tikal the first time I played, and I don't own it. The way scoring takes place always seems a bit wonky to me, but the second time went better, though I ended up last, and now I really enjoy playing it. The scoring rounds are still a bit weird, and the AP potential really showed up, but this time I played without worrying much and mostly by instinct and managed to get a victory with 111 points, which is dice, but never ever the determinant factor. Thanks for the contribution, Pedro. These are 3 great games to bring out of the dust. I play Dixit online every now and then, which is a random and unpredictable experience sometimes. King of New York is a fun one I play with my family, and Tikal, along with the rest of the Mask trilogy, is a game I wouldn't mind playing more often. On the reaction segment this week, I can't resist giving the popular online game store Cool Stuff Inc. a hard time about something. CSI does a weekly thematic sale. Usually these aren't very exciting. There's usually only a board game or two included in the sale, and they're not generally very good ones. I still shop at CSI occasionally myself. They had a good Black Friday sale last year, for instance. But I mostly shifted my business to Miniature Market, which has a more generous hold policy. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, CSI announced their weekly thematic sale and termed it the Warp Speed Sale. So, with a name like that, you'd expect some Star Trek games in the sale, right? Well, there weren't any, but you know what was included in the sale? Some Star Wars items! Let that sink in for a moment. Warp Speed Sale. With Star Wars items! CSI. That's just embarrassing. You can't have a Warp Speed Sale without Star Trek items and sell Star Wars items in it instead. That's the kind of mistake I might tolerate from a faceless monolith like Barnes & Noble or Target. But I expect better of you, Cool Stuff Inc. Your geek cred has been tarnished by this unforgivable debacle. I don't know how you could possibly recover from this travesty. Shame! 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 On the What I Have Been Playing segment this week, I'm going to talk about Merlin, which I finally got to play. Despite this being a Stefan Feld game, I was not an original backer of the game on Kickstarter, because it was a Queen Games Kickstarter. I have nothing against Queen, it's just that their games tend to wind up on Amazon for ridiculously low prices shortly after release, regardless of the quality of the title. I know that Queen said this Kickstarter was going to be completely exclusive with no retail release, but I didn't believe them. Queen doesn't exactly have the best of reputations where honesty is concerned. But I admit it, I was wrong this time. This game has remained a Kickstarter exclusive, for no good reason though, in my opinion. So I finally gave in and backed the game and expansion for Queen's most recent Merlin Kickstarter, which wrapped up not too long ago. Anyway, my friend Peter backed the game during its Second Chance Kickstarter, which was fulfilled earlier in the year, and I got to help him try it out. In Merlin, Feld uses a large shared action rondel that players control how far their marker advances through the use of personal dice drafting. There's an array of point-salad goodness in the form of task cards, area control on 2 separate boards, building manors, and defeating barbarians. The barbarians also represent the essential Feldian threat in this game that players must deal with or suffer from. And that's one of my favorite parts of Feld games, in fact. I love how he challenges players to deal with something the game throws at you, besides just what the other players may or may not do. And ultimately, that's why Merlin feels so Feldian. If I didn't know who designed it and then played it, I would be able to accurately identify Stefan Feld as the designer. He's one of those designers who has managed to develop a distinct style in his games, and Merlin, in many ways, oozes his distinct style a lot. I quite enjoyed it. Figuring out which dice to use when is both an agonizing and satisfying choice. I didn't do well my first game, but it's the sort of game that I immediately want to try and play again. We used the first Queenie in our first play, which was a great addition, and I'm looking forward to learning the other Queenies too. With November fast approaching, which is the estimated delivery for the expansion Kickstarter I backed, I may not have long to wait to try out my own copy. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week I'm going to tell you about an odd game called The Three Commandments. Published by Rio Grande in 2008, The Three Commandments has an impressive designer collaboration of Friedemann Friese and the Lamont brothers. It's also a surprising designer collaboration because, honestly, none of these designers' presence is felt in this game. It doesn't have the amazing components typically associated with the Lamont brothers, who I mentioned last week in this segment as the designers of Spellbound, nor does it have any of the earmarks that one might typically associate with Friedemann Friese, except, perhaps, the fact that it's a truly unique game. And Friedemann Friese has come to be known as someone who is not afraid to design in new and unexpected directions. That is evident in this 10-year-old game, which I also wound up being able to claim as a game only I played last month. That's how obscure this game is. The people in my group were the only ones to log a play of it in the entire world. This is a difficult game to describe because it's a game with an identity problem. On one hand, it's an abstract deduction game, but at the same time, it's also trying to be a silly party game. Here's how it works. One player is the priestess and chooses from 4 randomly drawn rule cards, 3 to be enshrined as the commandments of the priestess's religion, and 1 to be taboo. Some of these cards involve arranging wooden pieces in various colors and shapes and various configurations on the game board. That's where the abstract deduction part of the game comes into play. On each of their turns, a player will move one of the pieces to a new space and/or configuration and thus try to deduce what the rules are governing placement of these abstract pieces based upon the points that the priestess awards them. But some of the cards involve performing or avoiding certain actions, like speaking, gesturing, moving around, stuff like that, which is where the party game element comes into play. Because when a player moves one of the abstract pieces on the board, they also have to do so while performing some action of their invention or speaking a certain way. And that's also where the problem with the game comes into play. At least for my group, the abstract deduction part of the game was way more interesting than the party game element. We had something to work with in the abstract deduction element based on how the priestess initially set up her pieces, but players get nothing to work with on the party game aspect. There is no slate of possible actions to choose from, and it's a completely blind guess to try to figure out what action might be a rule or taboo. Ultimately, players are awarded points when the rules are figured out, or not figured out if too many incorrect guesses are made in a row, based on how well they did with their best guess during a round. Once everyone has had a turn being the priestess, the game ends and final scores are tallied. Thematically, I'm not sure what award or honor players get if they win. It's certainly a unique game, and there's nothing else quite like it out there, but I can see why my group were the only ones to log a play of it last month. And honestly, I don't think we'll be logging another. The radical difference between the two parts of the game is pretty jarring to me. Deduction is not my first choice for a game anyway, but I'd sure rather be doing that than performing silly actions and deduction at the same time. I continue my top 5 games for Halloween countdown this week with number 2 on the list, Ghost Stories, designed by Antoine Bauza and published by Repos Productions in 2008. Hey, look at that! Another game on this list celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Ghost Stories is an absolutely brutal cooperative game, even on normal mode, that tasks players as Taoist monks to defeat a horde of angry spirits and their master, Wu Fang. Players lose if too many locations become haunted, if the spirit cards run out from the deck, or if all the monks die. Because a new spirit enters play every single turn, and continually do bad things each round they remain in play, things can often spiral irreparably out of control very quickly, which is the main reason the game is so difficult to beat. But this difficulty is part of what makes the game so addictive. It keeps me coming back for more punishment because every victory, rare as those might be sometimes, are that much more satisfying when they do happen. Many people cite this as one of the most difficult cooperative games out there, but I think Bowser's other cooperative game, Samurai Spirit, is even more difficult. My wife and I actually have about a 50% win percentage on normal difficulty in Ghost Stories, and I think we're going to try upping the difficulty the next time we play. I got my copy from BGG's Secret Santa a couple of years ago, and it's instantly become an October regular for us. There are expansions for this game, but they are not ones I am compelled to buy. I'm really happy with the game as it is. I'm perfectly satisfied exploring the various monk power combinations in the game.